Hello, my name's Ben.
And my name's Josh.
Welcome back to FPL Graduates and welcome back to another video. And it's time for the double game week, the first big double of the season for us. It's going to be really exciting. We're going to go into some transfer targets and who we think you should be targeting for this first double game week of the season.
Okay then, yeah, so we're going to get into some transfer targets, and to be quite honest, because it is a double game week, we're only really going to be focusing on Everton and Liverpool assets, as well as Bournemouth as well, just because we're looking a little bit further ahead with those guys. Obviously, this game week, Liverpool at home, is not the best fixture and not the best entry point for these, but all of them seem to be rising in price as well. So it's a case of, if you've got the ability and the free transfers too, I wouldn't really necessarily mind maybe picking up some of these guys this week and then benching them, and then obviously headed into that lovely fixture run of Southampton away and Wolves at home in their next three. Huijsen is the defensive pick for me. I think I'd choose him just over Kerkez due to the price difference. I don't think the attacking threat is too different. Obviously, Huijsen has got 2 goals so far this season since coming in to the side, 5 clean sheets in that time as well, which is like a clean sheet basically every other game. So Bournemouth defensively rank inside the top 6 in terms of defences in the Premier League this season. What's your thoughts on Bournemouth in general, Ben? Obviously, been really some 2 good performances in the last 2 weeks. Are you looking to hop on from next week?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a consideration from next game week onward. Obviously, the entry point isn't ideal, but we are at that point in the season where team value is up for a lot of managers, and a lot of managers who have had a good season to this point will have decent team value. So the assets that Bournemouth have are all at a price point that are affordable anyway. So I don't necessarily think you need to rush in at this entry point this week, but going forwards, I think that you could be doing a lot worse than bringing in Bournemouth assets, especially with the fixture run that they've got coming up. Of course, we've seen that how quickly it can change. Like, Bournemouth turned over a very good Nottingham Forest team on a very good run of fixtures. So these teams do come up out of the woodwork, and it's all about hopping on whilst they're in that good run. I do see that carrying on for particularly those 2 games after Liverpool anyway. And a defensive asset isn't the worst sort of idea at all. Okay, so next up in the defence is the first double game week player that we are talking about, Vitaly Mykolenko of Everton. Of course, the minutes are fairly secure with Mykolenko playing as a fullback. The XGI and big chance involvement isn't as high maybe as it has been in previous seasons, and we mentioned this in sort of the last couple transfer targets videos. But Everton as a defensive sort of whole, you can maybe sort of don't expect 2 clean sheets out of 2 because that's just not going to happen. But if you can get 1 clean sheet out of this and potentially an attacking return, then you're doing really well out of this. I'd say the sort of point ceiling is fairly low, but it's more likely that you're going to get some points out of them than sort of like the clean sheets that you might get from a single game week team. So it's definitely a consideration. I wouldn't say it's a must-have, but if you are sort of looking around with a spare free transfer, I don't think you can go too wrong with Mykolenko, at least for the short term.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the pick here is not on the ceiling; it's more on the floor. Like, even if he doesn't keep a clean sheet against Leicester, you're expecting maybe 2 or 3 points. That tends to be quite significantly higher than some of the defensive assets that we've had in recent weeks. The likes of City defenders like Lewis, Colwill. If you've got any players like that, Mazraoui, I've seen in a few teams. They're equal prices, and you're going to be paying, for a Leicester team. I know they just beat Spurs, but that's not too hard these days by the looks of things. So yeah, I think there's all good chance. Obviously, 2 home games. You never know what could happen in terms of the clean sheets there. Obviously, it's the last Merseyside derby as well, so you've got to take that into some consideration, because I just don't think it'll be a walk in the park for Liverpool in that game. And Everton defensively as well, they don't tend to concede bunches of goals. They tend to concede the odd goal here and there, and defensively have been very solid this season. Obviously, I think 8 clean sheets so far this season. It's really good data. Okay then, so moving on to a Liverpool defender. Obviously, they lost a clean sheet in the 90th minute against Ipswich. I owned Konate and brought him in last week, so that was incredibly frustrating for me, seeing obviously how well Gakpo did as well. But if you wanted to sort of veer off, or maybe can't reach Gakpo, maybe you're happy with your forward, something like that, I think generally the defensive double up with Trent, obviously Trent being the second best asset from Liverpool, is a good option. Defensively, they are solid this season, between first and second best. Them and Arsenal seem to be switching that about in recent weeks in terms of their expected goals against data. Obviously, the goal threat isn't high with Konate. Owners got very lucky for that assist Obviously for Szoboszlai for the opening goal last week, just a simple pass into him and he did the rest of the work. But I think aerially, there is chances there to be had. He's a 6'4" centre half. There's a good chance that he can get on the end of a set piece here and there. I think genuinely you're probably bringing it in more for a defensive cover. And like I sort of mentioned with Mykolenko, defensive assets have been really hard to come by this season. So if you can get someone whose floor is going to be, potentially 6 points, you'd expect them to get a clean sheet, I think, in one of those games. I think, it's a good option to go with. It's just whether you think, or it's more situational, I think, in terms of if you don't have Gakpo or if you can't get to Gakpo, that's probably when you'd sort of decide upon it. What's your thoughts on that Liverpool defence, Ben?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of recency bias with managers not wanting to go with the double Liverpool defence. And you know what, I can see the reasoning behind that. But the best thing for those who currently have Konate is that, not the best thing, but maybe sort of a positive you can take from it, is that EO is going to remain really low for that Liverpool double defence. So the gains are there to be made if the two games are slightly underwhelming for Liverpool. The more underwhelming it is, the better almost. And I do see two tight games against Bournemouth and Everton. So I do think you could make and claw returns back from having a Konate from those that went with Gakpo. Obviously, it's a difficult one. I certainly wouldn't be transferring out Konate to facilitate a Gakpo move, because I do think the Liverpool defence is solid. It was just a sort of really sort of big swing in terms of the clean sheet loss and Gakpo scoring 16 points. If Liverpool don't, if Liverpool keep that clean sheet in the end, then you're looking sort of at a lot less of a swing from that regard. So a lot of people are going to be sort of recency bias and maybe sort of taking hits to try and facilitate Gakpo, but I do think there is value to be had in that Liverpool defence still. Okay, so next up is not a defender, it is a goalkeeper. We forgot to mention him at the start of the video, and actually think he's probably one of the better Everton assets that you can go for defensively. It's Jordan Pickford, and he is picking up returns when he is saving as many as he is. He's getting at least one save point per match, which is fantastic. It means the floor is raised up for Pickford compared to all the other Everton defenders. You could be looking at 3 or even 4 points a game, which then equates essentially to a clean sheet. Obviously dependent on sort of how many he concedes, etc. But he is going to pick up a lot of saves in both of those games. I believe so anyway, especially in that Liverpool game. If they hold on for sort of 60, 70 minutes, you're looking at a guaranteed sort of 4 or 5 pointer there, which is fantastic, even if they do concede, which is really, really good. And if we see sort of 2 tight games, then he could sneak into those bonus points as well. He's probably my favourite defensive asset from Everton. What about you, Josh?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think in general, in terms of goalkeepers, he actually ranks really highly, in my opinion. He gives you the best of both worlds, playing for a defence that tends to keep a lot of clean sheets, as well as having really high upside with those saves. And like you mentioned there, if he does get a clean sheet, the chance of him being in bonus is super, super high, because Everton, 1, don't score a lot of goals, so there's not a lot of people to take the bonus off him going forwards, and 2, he's always having to make saves, so he's always going to rank high in the bonus as well. So yeah, for me, I think the ceiling on this pick is probably one of the highest that we'll have from Everton this double game week, just because of how many saves he can make. Averaging 3 saves per game is absolutely huge. So yeah, I think if you're maybe in a position where, I don't know, you've got a Fabianski and you've got the money to go up to a Pickford or something like that, or maybe you're not happy with Raya and want to move him on, I think, I genuinely consider it, because even still, Pickford and all of these Everton players, they aren't going to blank in game week 29 as well, which is a huge, huge plus if you're looking at maybe sort of postponing your free hit till later in the season too. Okay then, so we're going to move on to the midfielders now, and we're going to talk about Justin Kluivert, one of 2 Bournemouth midfielders that we're going to talk about in here, just because we had quite a few questions on sort of who's better, which one should you go for. Obviously Kluivert's sort of been taking all the headlines with that hat-trick the game week before last, and then obviously 3 returns again last week. 5.7 million, it's a good price point, it's easy accessible, as Ben mentioned when talking about Huijsen. Obviously, like we said, entry point this week isn't the best. Kluivert is on penalties, which is a huge plus that you really need to consider when choosing these 2 assets. 11 goals so far this season, 4 assists. A lot of them have been penalties, so just bear that in mind. For me, I think he's looked phenomenal. he is getting a lot more minutes at the moment, which is great for owners. But I'd just be cautious, because as soon as they get any sort of those players back in their attacking midfield positions, there's a high chance that he comes back down to that sort of 60, 70 minutes that he was playing prior to all these injuries that Bournemouth have had. So, yeah, I think if he does play 90 minutes, he's a fantastic pick, and obviously has that penalty option as well. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, so I think Cliver is a decent option at the price point. Of course, for any FPL managers, 5.7 is affordable for most. So yeah, I do like him. Of course, a lot of the involvement is through penalties, which sort of holds its own merits, but also its own downside from open play. Another player that you could consider within that same price point, and actually he's 0.7 cheaper at the moment, is Ouattara in midfield as well. He's actually getting more big chance involvement than Cliver, which suggests from open play he might be sort of the better pick. Of course, the sample size of minutes is a little bit less. There is sort of slight sort of risk of minutes with a few of these Bournemouth midfielders, but since there are so many injuries, it's a little bit more secure in the short term. Ouattara is performing at the level, if not sort of a little bit better than Cliver from the open play data anyway that we're receiving. So at 5 million and at real low price point, if you really are struggling for budget, then you could go straight to him. But of course, Cliver, penalty threat, that's almost worth like 0.5 in itself.
Okay, then, so we're going to switch back to the double game weekers, and it's going to be Dominik Szoboszlai up first. He's got a double-digit haul against Ipswich last week, and with Curtis Jones out, it looks like his minutes are fairly secure for the short term as it stands. We're recording this on Monday night, just to timestamp it, UK time. So yeah, it should be decent, especially for this double anyway. Obviously, there's a lot of fixtures between those doubles. Don't forget, 6.3 million. So if you're maybe struggling for budget or need a cheaper option, I actually think Dominik Szoboszlai could be decent. His data is very similar to Cody Gakpo, who obviously has been performing really well. Positionally, it's a lot different though. Obviously, he's not going to be getting as into those sort of goal scoring positions as much. You're going to be relying on his quality as an individual to get those attacking returns, where we see the shots from outside the box, maybe potentially some set pieces if you're lucky. But yeah, what's your thoughts on him, Ben? Do you think, say if you can afford maybe a Diaz, only has sort of the one free transfer, would you be looking at him?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at Szoboszlai, it may be sort of at a point of sort of poor planning from your part, and I hate to say it, but he's not a bad option at all, and could be one that hauls. And we've seen him have mega hauls before because he can be so instrumental in games. So the less you're paying is for that sort of higher risk of minutes risk, etc. Although I do agree, like somewhat, there is a bit more security in those minutes. But you are sort of paying for sort of individual moments rather than sort of a system that lends itself to him getting consistent returns. So that's the only sort of downside. But again, with these sort of games that they've got coming up, I do anticipate 2 tight games. So if he does get on the score sheet, it's likely it's going to be all 3 bonus points as well. So don't mind the pick. Maybe sort of, the preference would be one of the other sort of Liverpool midfielders or attackers, but, don't mind the pick at all. Okay, so leading on into the striker position, we've got Cody Gakpo of Liverpool, of course, off the back of a 16-point haul last game week, which really does show the ceiling potential of him, which is fantastic to see. I was very 50-50 on bringing in either Gakpo or Luis Diaz. I got away with it and brought in Gakpo, and the big returns is good, really good. But also, I think there's going to be a lot of people hindsight and panic buying him in. Do I necessarily think that he's going to get a 16-point haul again? I don't think that there's going to be a 16-point haul in either of these games from any asset in the game. So my opinion on him remains the same as it did pre-16-point haul. I think he's a decent asset. I still think it's a very 50-50 call between Luis Diaz and him on who gets more points this week, because the ceiling is there for both players. The minute security is pretty secure for both. I'd say maybe Cody Gakpo edges it just a bit more because of how many minutes and starts that he's got in a row. But I do believe a haul can come from any one of those 3 attacking Liverpool assets at any given moment. So if you are sort of transferring him just based on that 16-point haul, I think maybe sort of have a relook and see what you're doing. Like, I've obviously got him in myself based on last week. But Josh, what's your thoughts? Is he the best third Liverpool asset?
I think so, yeah. I think even before the 16-pointer, I thought that he was the best. It's just sort of managing to get him inside. Obviously, those forward spots are really lucrative for numerous amounts of reasons. So, like I myself, I couldn't really get there. I do think he is the best, though, in that position. I think he does edge Diaz slightly. But like you say, I definitely think that last week was a massive overperformance. He did get a little bit lucky with, a couple of the goals just sort of fall into him. That could happen to anyone else on any given day. Saying that though, like you say, it does show how good he could be. And that is obviously the highest point score that we saw from him so far this season. So yeah, I don't think he'll necessarily match that heights of those 16 points last week. He'll do really well to do that again. So general consensus, if you've got 3 Liverpool already, I probably wouldn't look to move off them and try and sneak him in, because I think you'll be hitting yourself if you're like take out Diaz and try and bring in Gakpo. There's every chance in the world, like Ben mentions, for Diaz to do the same sort of thing, despite having no shots against Ipswich. I think it was more of a positional matchup that they tried to exploit with a lot of crosses to the back post, which we saw goals from Gakpo, saw goals from Salah from that sort of methods. I don't think that'll be the same against Bournemouth and Everton because they both played the back 4. So yeah, for me, I think it's almost a fixture that really suited Gakpo. I'm not sure necessarily it will be as sort of efficient in these next 2 in the double. Okay then, so yeah, the last player in our transfer targets for this week is going to be Iliman Ndiaye. Obviously scored the penalty against Brighton last game week that got a lot of people's ears pricked for sure on him. 5.4 million is a lovely price point, especially for those João Pedro owners who are sort of taking a glance at him for this double. 5 goals so far this season from an XG of 3. I'm not going to lie, the data is pretty horrific considering how many minutes he's played, but you come to expect that with Everton assets. Dominic Calvert-Lewin is going to be ruled out for a significant period of time. I don't think we got a specific time frame on that, but what we do know is that Ndiaye also picked up a knock towards the end of the game against Brighton, so there's no definite confirmation that Ndiaye is fit. So if you are looking at Ndiaye, I would definitely wait until Friday's press conference where hopefully David Moyes will give us a little bit of an update. But for me, if he is fit as a João Pedro owner, I'd be very tempted to sort of turn him in and sort of target that double and attack it for that Leicester at home fixture in particular. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, this is a classic FPL case of rolling the dice right here with Ndiaye. The stats do not match up to say that he's going to be sort of any good this week, but the double game week fixture is there, and the fixture against Leicester is there. Like, despite them beating Spurs this week, you don't trust that Leicester defence at all. And the fact that we know he's on penalties now is a key indicator as well. If Everton didn't get a penalty this week, we'd be, questioning this decision a lot more. But we know that he will be on penalties with DCL out. So, yeah, I'm absolutely tempted myself as well. A lot of people jumping on the DCL bandwagon last week will probably just go straight to Ndiaye because that's the sort of managers that will just jump to him as well. If you're going to take the chance and really attack the double game week, look, I think, go for maybe one Everton defender and Mikalenko and Pickford and then one of the attackers. The data's not going to be great, but all you need is a goal in that Leicester game, and essentially that Liverpool game is almost just a couple of extra bonus points for you.
Okay then, so that wraps up our Game Week 24 transfer targets. Hopefully we've helped you decide what sort of double game week is to get into your team. Any questions and comments that you have, please leave them down below and we'll get back to you before the deadline.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be clear, our number 1 and 2 favourite Liverpool assets are Salah and Trent Alexander-Arnold, but we'd assume you'd already have them in. So as always, please remember to like, comment and subscribe to the FPL Graduates. I've been Ben.
I've been Josh.
We'll see you guys
next time. Have a good game week, everyone.
Oh, you may rise, but you'll never make me wanna stick around you.